Every single company hiring for a product manager has a behavioral round. Yes, no matter if you're interviewing at big tech, mid-stage companies, early startups, they always do a behavioral check to ensure the product manager that they're hiring is the absolute best and the most culturally fit for their organization. So today in this video, I'm going to give you a framework that is going to help you ace the behavioral round. You wouldn't have seen this framework in other videos because this is a proprietary framework that we've created. And also, I'm going to show it to you via an artifact that I have built only for you to apply your behavioral prep well. The link for this artifact is going to be in the description. So let's jump right in and try and see what framework we will use to answer behavioral questions. So as you can see on my screen, we have created the behavioral interview prep machine. So what does the behavioral interview prep machine do? Very simple. We've sourced questions from top companies. Of course, you can see a few of them on your screen. Otherwise, we've got thousands of companies that are hiring for product roles. Then we show you the questions that these companies typically ask in their behavioral rounds. And then I'm going to talk about our framework, the PRISM framework of how you can answer these questions well. So let's jump right in. So here what you see on the first screen is the company. For this video, I'm going to select Amazon to try and show you some of the questions that Amazon asks its product managers in the behavioral rounds. Once you open the questions, it shows you what questions Amazon has been asking to their product managers in the behavioral round. As you can see, there is leadership, then there is teamwork, resilience, integrity, all of Amazon's values and typical questions within them. So for this video, I'm just going to select one question. Here, I'm going to select a question on a frugal decision that worked. As you know, Amazon is really big on frugality. It's one of their core values. So this question keeps coming up again and again. So I'll just click on this. And now comes my framework. The framework is called PRISM, P-R-I-S-M. P stands for the problem. R stands for the role. I stands for the insight. S stands for the solution. And M stands for the meta learning. Right? Very interesting framework that we've created just for you. Whenever you answer any question in a behavioral round, right? No matter the question is a hypothetical question, the question is your experience drilled down, anything, you always go back to this framework. You tell the interviewer 5 things. What was the problem? What role did you play in that problem? What was the underlying insight that you gained from that problem and solving it? Finally, what was the solution that you created and deployed? And then at the end, what was the meta learning, which is what was the larger learning that you had from this experience that you have applied in your future? Extremely important to imbibe this framework. Unless you know this framework well, you're going to struggle in your behavioral rounds. So here I have described what it means. Problem. Every great answer in behavioral rounds starts with a great problem. So unless your problem feels important, unless your problem feels big, the interviewer may take you for someone who was playing a junior role or may take you for someone who wasn't as important. Then role. Were you working individually? Were you working as a team? This is the chance where you can portray yourself as a leader. You can portray yourself as someone who was owning multiple pieces. Insight, which is what was the insight that you got from the experience. This is the only thing that takes an answer from a 6 on 10 to a 10 on 10, because a 6 on 10 answer will talk about the problem solution, and I'm sure you must have read about STAR and all that frameworks. It's great, but a great answer talks about the insight. Unless you describe the insight that you've gained, the interviewer can take the problem as a small one, take the solution as a fleeting one, and also not fully grasp it. But the moment you tell the interviewer what was the underlying insight, and if that insight is interesting, you have to make it interesting, the interviewer stands up and takes notice. So insight is the most important part of the PRISM framework. What did you learn? Or what was the insight that you did not know and uncovered? Finally, the solution, which was what is the solution that you offered? How did you go about it? Who were the people involved? Be very specific, right? Behavioral questions are all about experiences. If you go ahead and say my engineering manager, replace with my engineering manager, Mr. Chaudhary, right? Small things, but these tell the interviewer that you were there and you've actually lived through these experiences. Similarly, metrics. Don't talk about the solution as an abstract concept. Try and add metrics to it. Add simple metrics, revenue, paid users, metrics that help the interviewer understand that you are owning big things. Don't complicate metrics with terms that are very technical or related only to your domain. Use metrics that everyone knows. Everyone knows what revenue is. Everyone knows what paid users are. Everyone knows what retention is. So try and use simple terms to quantify the impact alongside the solution. And then finally, meta learning, right? Talk about what was the mental model that you built because of this, right? What has been the learning that you have taken from this experience and moved ahead? If you were talking about a failure story, then talk about what have you changed in your approach so that that failure never happens again. If it was a success story, talk about the fact about what mental model you created which has helped you succeed again and again in further projects. If it was a situation where you had disagreed but committed, talk about how you learned to negotiate better and were able to negotiate better terms next time. Every time a behavioral answer ends without a meta learning, the interviewer can take your overall work to be a one-time thing and can give you less credit for it than you deserve. So meta learning is very, very important for you to answer your behavioral problems well. Now, let's go further on our artifact and try and apply this. All right. Now, what the behavioral interview prep machine does is it forces you to create your story. For the question we picked, it's going to give you some inspirations of the kind of narratives you can pick. Remember, for a behavioral answer, if you only answer in hypotheticals, which is if I were to be frugal, I would have done this or done that, it doesn't work. No matter how hypothetical the question sounds, even if the question is extremely hypothetical, it's something that you've never done before. For example, how are you going to adapt to a new domain? Even then, the goal has to be to give a story. For example, if someone asks you, how did you adapt to a new domain? Talk about when you have adapted to a new domain in the past. Unless you give a narrative, unless you give an actual story, it's extremely difficult for the interviewer to believe that what you're saying is not fluff and is actually true. So always remember to link the question that the interviewer has posed to an actual story. Now, this is what the interview prep machine from Ayuda does here. What I'm doing is I have the question around a frugal decision that has worked. It gives me inspiration. So it gives me an inspiration on when did you build something with no budget. It gives me another question around thinking about a time when there was a constraint that made the solution better. It prompts me about thinking of a situation when I couldn't have bought a solution and had actually to be frugal. So this is what it does for all the different kind of questions that we have. So it gives you an inspiration of what to think whenever you prepare for it. Now, going ahead and you dump your raw story in. So I'm just going to do that and I'm going to dump my raw story here. I'm just going to do a little bit of it so that you get the gist. Of course, when you practice, you need to be a little more thorough with this, but let me dump my story and tell you. So in my last role, there was a big bet that we wanted to take. We wanted to create a new product for restaurants and their billing purposes, but we did not want to spend a lot of time on building it. We did not want to spend a lot of money on building it because we wanted to be frugal and we were chasing profitability as a company. Now, this was an interesting challenge because while the product was very complex and the incumbents in the market were really strong, we had to take that frugal approach to make sure that the experience is great, but the cost of building it is less. So at my last organization, we wanted to launch a new product. This was around solving the restaurant billing problems for smaller restaurants. Of course, the bet was very interesting. We had done a lot of validation, but the company was chasing profitability, which meant that we did not have the luxury of spending a lot of money on building it. We did not have a big team. We did not have a lot of budget to run on ads and so on and so forth. Now, this posed a very interesting problem for me because one piece of it was to be able to build it with a small team. Another piece of it was to be able to sell and take it to the market with a low budget. I looked at both of the problems. The first one was where I tried to leverage the same team to get more roles. What I did was I asked my designer to step up and play a PM role, which meant that I did not have to take another APM or a PM to do that. I spent a lot of time with the designer, ensured that they did a good job at it. I looked at my engineering and tried to push them, try to create an environment where they had a lot of ownership, where they saw how important this project is for their careers and stuff like that. Of course, setting great rewards for a small team to stretch for long hours is another great way to do it. Now, when it comes to the budget, it was again trying to find, organic reels, viral reels that help us reach the market, that help us get initial traction, so that everyone in the company could be convinced that this was worth solving or this was very important from there. So I worked with the marketing team, tried to brainstorm on a lot of ideas that had come from my research, and luckily a couple of reels ended up going viral. And then once that happened, we got a lot of users and people started believing on the product and started investing more. Right? The underlying insight was that it's not about the budget, because we were chasing profitability, but once you prove something, then it becomes easy for your stakeholders to actually bet money on it. And what I learned as a longer term thing is that don't get disheartened. I don't really get disheartened when people look at the project that I'm taking and look at cutting budgets or look at giving lesser budgets, because initially it felt like a constraint of how do I achieve this with a small team, how do I achieve this without a lot of budget in marketing and all of that. But the best way to do it is to work with what you've got, to do the best at that point, and then eventually once numbers come in, everyone's alignment follows. And that's something that I've kept with me for every project that I do. I try to be frugal first. I try to ensure that I have elapsed all the frugal methods of growing that product or building that product, and only then, once I've gotten some proof of work, do we actually invest more money on it. So while it looked like a challenge earlier on, it has become a mindset where I approach almost every feature that I do with a very frugal approach. So see what I did there, right? I gave a situation, I talked about what all things did I do, I talked about what was the problem, I talked about who the team was, how I went ahead and uplifted them. And towards the end, when I was talking about my meta learning, I correlated it directly back to frugality, right? Very smartly, because that's what I want to do, right? If they're asking me a situation where I've shown frugality, they want to know that I have been frugal in the past. And now there is a very clear picture of the fact that I have built a product, launched it with a lot of frugality, and that is what is going to win the confidence and the trust of the interviewer. So now what the prep machine does is it asks me if this fit Amazon, the product I've selected, does it fit the question, so that it can help you generate a better answer. I'm just going to do yes, try out with no as well when you attempt it. Right, now it's time to structure your answer. As you can see on my screen, my raw dump is pasted on this artifact, and now it allows me to auto-fill it according to the PRISM structure that we've studied, right? So all you need to do is get the story inspiration, dump all your thoughts here, and then just with a click of the button, it will convert everything to the PRISM format. Let's try and do it. So an LLM at the background is going through everything, and there you go. It's broken it down to the problem that I had, the role that I played, the insight that I generated, the solution that was offered, and the meta learning I had. Sometimes there are things that may be great learnings that you might miss out. For example, I did not mention the virality of a reel as a meta learning, right? But here, a meta learning could be that. Now, once I've done this, I can go to next and then generate a PRISM answer. So my problem, role, insight, solution, and meta learning gets combined into a structural answer that you can just say in front of your interviewer. So as you can see, the answer is written. So your broken structure with your raw dump and everything is now broken to a great answer using our PRISM structure, and is going to help you in every behavioral round. Now, of course, in our program, we have thousands of companies and everyone's answer, which means that you have access to all the questions and then the PRISM to give your answers, which is very useful. But for free, I'm going to give you the answers to these companies and the artifact link in the description of this video. So go ahead and apply, prepare for your behavioral round. It's the most important round. If you impress your hiring manager, they will fight for you, even if your product sense analytics is a little weaker. So go ahead and use the artifact and prepare for your behavioral round, and never forget to use PRISM whenever you're answering a behavioral question. All the very best, and I'll see you in the next video.